took your first pace like a man, and you learned the two greatest things in life.
What?
Look at me. Never rat on your friends, and always keep your mouth shut.
Who was Jimmy the Gent Burke? Jimmy the Gent Burke was one of the notorious Irish-American gangsters of all time, a violent, ruthless criminal responsible for countless murders and one of the largest cash robberies in American history. He is also one of the real-life Goodfellas. Burke was never an official member of the Mafia. His Irish blood excluded him from Italian-only ranks, but he spent his bloody career working closely with the made men and associates of two of the 5 New York crime families. He had a son who jumped him in the organized crime and a daughter who married a gangster, and Burke himself was the inspiration for the character Jimmy the Gent Conway, played by Robert De Niro in Martin Scorsese's 1990 movie Goodfellas. If any gangster came troubled childhood, it was Burke. Born James Conway on July 5, 1931 in New York, he never knew who his father was. His Irish mother, Jane Conway, placed him in a foster home when he was 2. He spent his early years in a Catholic orphanage. Much of Burke's young life was marked by severe abuse, as he was passed from his other foster home to another. Some foster parents treated him kindly, while others abused him physically and sexually. Eventually, the Burke family of Rockaway, Queens adopted him. His life began unpleasant and calm, and even years after he established himself as a criminal player. He visited them several times each year and sent them money. As a young man, Burke worked briefly as a bricklayer. It made him strong, but it didn't last. He was soon scheming and pulling off other crimes. Burke may have seen a master criminal later in his career, but early on he was better at getting caught than anything else. Between the ages of 16 and 22, he was behind bars for all but 86 days. During one of these stints, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison in 1949. When he was 18 for passing bad checks, the fact that he kept his mouth shut about his partners earned him points with the Mafia. Inside prison, he had a reputation as a tough guy. He solidified his connections with Italian mob performing murders inside prison and behest of made men. An unusual accomplishment for any associate-led Irish one, he managed to find good work under both the Lucchese and the Colombo crime families. Once he was released from prison, Burke made a name for himself in profitable crimes like cigarette smuggling, hijacking, loan sharking, extortion, drug dealing and armed robbery, to keep his victims and fellow criminals in line. He routinely resorted to murder of the most violent sort. Indeed, he seemed to release the job. When he was about to marry in 1962, he discovered his finest ex-boyfriend was stalking her, calling her, shouting her at the sidewalk, driving by the house repeatedly. The day of the wedding, cops found the boyfriend's body in his car, chopped up into a dozen pieces. Burke was happy to murder almost anyone, whether by himself or by order. He routinely killed of witnesses and informants after crooked cops picked him off to the whereabouts, and he didn't hesitate to murder his fellow gangsters in order to get a bigger cut of the scam. Nonetheless, he had a reputation as a charming, generous gentleman. He was known to tip the drivers of the trucks he hijacked and helped out strangers. Burke tough, he wasn't a made man, ran an informed mob crew house whose members included Henry Hill, the famous Mafia rat whose story inspired by Goodfellas. He worked out of Brooklyn and Queens, where Burke owned a bar called the Robert Lounge. Robert was supposedly the brutal site of more than a dozen mob victims. It was also the place where Burke and his crew dreamed up the most audacious plans, including the most of them all, the Lufthansa heist. Burke and Hill were sent to prison for 10 years for beating up a foreman who owed the money to the friend. Both men got out about 6 years later and went straight back to the organized crime, where they became involved in drug trafficking despite of their Mafia bosses. But it was the Lufthansa heist that made Jimmy Burke a real-life Goodfella. Under his planning and recruitment, a team of mob associates robbed the Lufthansa cargo hold at John F. Kennedy International Airport in Queens. They got away with almost $6 million in cash and jewelry, the largest robbery of its kind at the time. The job made Burke and his bosses rich, but also made him paranoid. Burke was surprised by the size of the take, and he worried the resulting publicity made it more like someone would talk. Not only did the actual robbers get very little money out of the deal, most of them wound up dead. At least one was killed because Burke simply wanted to pay him his share. In the 1980s, the drug trafficking that Burke and Hill had done behind the boss's backs finally caught up with them. Hill, a trafficker who became addicted to the product, was arrested and faced decades in prison. That mentions a mob that probably wanted him dead for dealing drugs. So Hill flipped in what arguably ranks to the most famous example or mafioso rating out of his friends and associates. He's saying about his bosses, his mentors, his friends, and he's saying about Burke. Hill's testimony in federal court led to 50 convictions, including those of Burke and their boss Palfario, and marked the beginning of the end of the real-life Goodfellas crew. In 1982, Burke was sentenced to 20 years for his role in fixing Boston College basketball games in 1978. In 1985, Burke received an additional life sentence for murdering con artist Richard Eaton, who had swindled him out of $25,000 in drug money. Jimmy the Dent Burke, age 64, died of lung cancer on April 13, 1996 at Roswell Park Gangster Institute in Buffalo, New York. He was still serving his sentence and would have been eligible for parole in 2004.